Thank you, Lynn Gowland, for the worship. Amazing. I love singing and worshiping Jesus. It's amazing. So thank you for that. Welcome for those who have joined us, who missed the welcome at the beginning. There's a lot more of us on Zoom, and welcome to those who are watching on Facebook as well. Lovely to have you with us. If you're here for the first time, fantastic. Let me just say again that we did a lot of the biblical foundational stuff last week, which is available both on Facebook and YouTube. And if you're going to be joining us in future weeks, I would suggest that you had a little dip into that and so you're fully aware of the conversation as we go through the weeks. So we did say last week that I believe that God was wanting to establish a governmental leadership for his church, and part of that governmental leadership was the restoration of the apostolic or the apostle to the church today. And another thing was that we were trying to say that this just was not about the restoration of the office of the apostle, but about creating an apostolic culture in which we raise people who are apostolic by very nature of that culture. So that's where we kind of got to last week in a nutshell. There was a lot more to it than that, but that's where we kind of got to. And our hope as we go through these weeks in conversation together, and it's important that we recognize that we're in conversation together, is that we develop this conversation to a point where any revelation from heaven itself becomes your revelation and not mine or someone else's. Because the only way that this will stick is that you receive revelation direct from heaven yourself, and it sits within your spirit and therefore drives you. We all know actually what we truly believe is what we do, not just what we say we believe. And I believe God is building in these days. He's looking for believers, and that's where we are today. So we will continue to focus on the topic in hand, but a part of that is I met a wonderful couple who are with us to my right. I don't know whether they're on your screen, but Adam and Faye Carver, and they met Adam firstly at a leaders meeting down near Leeds, and the speaker didn't turn up, and we got an opportunity to speak, if I remember rightly, Adam.
We did.
So I stood up and spoke on as one, on John chapter 17, the need for us to be as one. And then Adam spoke too on the same subject, and then we had a good conversation afterwards. And our friendship has just grown since then, and recently got to know his wonderful wife, Faye. So I'm gonna, that's my introduction to these guys. I'm gonna let them tell you a little bit more about themselves, what they do, who they are. Just gonna hand over to them now. So over to you guys. Thank you for joining us tonight. We love you and we appreciate you coming. And the idea of having them here tonight is that Adam and Faye have been brought up in an apostolic culture. Their church is apostolic. They have an apostle who leads their church, as well as other churches, but they've been brought up in that culture. And tonight I wanted for us to get a flavour of what that looks like from their perspective. So over to you guys.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you so much for inviting us, Alan. Likewise, I remember that moment in Leeds very well. I thought, there is a man who speaks my language. And I immediately got up as soon as it finished and came and sat down and talked to you. And then you talked more of my language side, which put a smile on my face. And I've been delighted to, just to get to know you and serve you in a couple of ways as well. So thank you. So yeah, I'm Adam, this is Faye, in case you were wondering which was which. And we lead Christian Life Church in Shipley together. We've done that for the past 12, 13 years. And that is overseen by Paul Hubbard, who is our apostolic with our apostle. He's actually our father primarily, but he's also an apostle. I've known Paul for 15 years. Faye's known him for
about 24 years.
So we have a long history and relationship with him. So we lead that together. We do a couple of other things as well. I am involved in a group of 11, 12 churches in Shipley, Shipley Christians together. We've just started a Cap Debt Centre together. We're just doing some food parcels as well for February half term, which is new for us. And then we also have a business together that Faye leads as well. Well, Faye has a couple of business issues actually.
Was it my cue? So yeah, we have a children's soft play centre called Little Daisies, specifically for children under the age of 5. So we get a lot. Well, usually we get a lot of people coming through our doors to let their little ones loose, and yeah, just really relating the heart of God. Just meet people in a very normal, natural way, and just allow parents, grandparents, childminders just a little break and have a cup of tea in the evening, and we just part the heart of God to them. So yeah, usually I'm doing that midweek, and we have private parties as well. So yeah, we've been doing that for the last, how many years?
8 now.
Yeah, 8-9 years. But this has been our quietest year yet. But it's not ended, so it's going to continue. And I also have a business in Temple Spa, so I do virtual pamper evenings, lovely ladies, and yeah, treat them and bless them as well. So yeah, that's what I do. We have 4 children.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, we'll just throw that in there. 4 children and a dog. So it's a busy household. Our eldest is up near you guys, up in Durham, studying law. And yeah, then we've got a 16-year-old, a 14-year-old, and a 10-year-old. So yeah, a busy house.
And the rabbit, don't forget the rabbit.
Oh, we've got a rabbit too.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's kind of us and what we do in a very, very brief nutshell.
Yeah, leading the church. Yeah.
Brilliant. I know there's much more to your guys' story, but you know, maybe another time we'll hear more of that.
Yeah.
But it's absolutely fabulous to have you with us. And the fact that it's quiet and you've got 4 kids, a dog and a rabbit, sounds amazing. So I'm not sure how you've managed that, but
That's a good night.
So just another question then around this whole theme of the restoration of apostles. What does your relationship with an apostle look like?
Yeah, well, for us, like I say, we've known Paul for a long time. Paul originally birthed Christian Life Church back in the mid-90s. He spent some time in Norway, planted some churches there. Then, because his wife's Norwegian, ended up over here. He was a founder in starting Bradford Christian School. He in starting Christians Against Poverty. If you know Christians Against Poverty, John Kirkby, who founded all that, it was Paul who led him to the Lord. It was Paul who was with him when he first started it. So Paul's got this track record in starting things, really, and building things. And then, but I think the principal way we relate to him is as a father.
Yeah.
So our primary relationship would not be kind of apostle pastors. It would be father son, father daughter. That's our principal way of relating to him. Because my understanding of the apostolic is that it's not organizational, it's relational.
Yeah.
So I know some people kind of think of it as they think of it as a pyramid, you know, the apostle's at the top and he's going to tell everybody what to do. In truth, it's an inverted pyramid because the apostle sits at the bottom. He's the foundation. Well, actually, Christ is at the bottom because he's the foundation and the apostle builds on that foundation. And then above them, you have, in my understanding, you have gift ministry and then other stuff. So, and I think, so my understanding of, and what I've seen and experienced of Paul as an apostle is his ability to lay down his life.
Yeah.
So, you know, when we'll talk maybe in a bit about words like submission or authority, when I talk about those words, it's in relation to a man who has laid down his life for me. Yeah. It's in relation to a man who is the very best parts of a father to us in every way, and who's been consistent and faithful to us, and who has never told us what to do or even what we must do or what we cannot do, because it's all about relational. And I think just to put some scripture in it, one of the key scriptures for me in this is John chapter 8. And I'll just read a couple of verses to you. So John chapter 8 and verse 49. I do not have a demon, but I honor my Father, And then 54, Jesus says, if I honor myself, my honor is nothing, it's my Father honors me. And key to our relationship is this sense of honor. But what's interesting is that Jesus honors the Father and the Father honors Jesus. But when you look behind those words, you find the two Greek words for honor are very different. So in verse 49, the Greek word is timeo, which means to value, to honor a gift, as it were. Whereas the Greek word in verse 54 is doxazo, which means to render glorious. So Jesus honors the Father, and this is how we think about Paul. We honor him by valuing him. We see him as a gift into our lives, and you honor a gift, you bless a gift, you're grateful for a gift. And he honors us, but differently, because doxazo means to render glorious. So doxazo means to bring out the glory in somebody. So when I think about Father, Son, Apostle, Pastor, Apostle, whatever, in terms of other gift ministry, I think the relationship it's a relationship of equals, but yet it's different. So Paul is not above us in that sense. He's not over us in a negative sense. He is with us, and we are together, and we honor one another. But his honor to us is to make us more glorious. In other words, to present us more glorious to the Father. So his role is to help us become more like Jesus. And it's our role to honor him in that. And I think the other really important thing about it is, Paul is not just on his own. He has a spiritual father called Derek Brown, who's down in Aldershot. And he is a son to Derek. So Derek renders him more glorious, and Paul honors him as a gift. And now we have spiritual sons and daughters under us, and we render them more glorious, and they honor us. And there's this pattern that flows all the time in terms of fathers and sons. So that's how I would have experienced it and seen it.
Yeah.
And I think for us as leaders and pastors of a church, the power of that is incredible. And I know we'll get on to later about, well, what's the benefit? But I think it's massive. Because for us, so, I mean, I'm not really a pastor, actually. My primary gifting is a teacher. That's my primary gifting. It took me the 10 years of my 30s to learn to love people, basically. That was my 30s, was learning to pastor. My idea of compassion when I was 29 was pull yourself together, what's wrong with you? And kind of walk off. Now I cry when everybody only tells me a story, because Paul's rendered me more glorious, because he's taught me what it means to love people. He's modeled what it means to love people by loving me. And I think that for me it's this relational thing. I think if we think of it as organizational, then we're on the wrong foot straight off. If it's not relational, an apostle is not a church consultant who comes in every 3 months to kind of cast his eye over and you don't hear from him. An apostle is somebody who you text 2 or 3 times a week. We were with him for a walk on Monday. We're going to go for another walk next week. We'll text, we'll email, we'll share, and when we go and talk with him, as we did in this walk, it wasn't, we don't just talk about church stuff. He's like, well, we talk about our marriage, we talk about our kids, we talk about the business. Yes, we talk about what's going on in the church, but actually most of the time it's about us as people, as sons and daughters, and what that means. So that's kind of that's our experience of it and how we see it. And does that?
That's good. Paul is still a father to the church? Is he still at church? Does he still come along on a weekly basis? What?
Yeah. So what happened was 2005, I met him for the first time. It was actually my mum and dad's church then. My mum and dad had planted a church. I was with them, and they were in relationship with him. To cut a long story short, I ended up kind of going with Paul with my mum and dad's blessing. He talked to them and said, before he talked to me, very honouring to them, and said, look, and they were at a stage where they felt like, they actually said to me, I feel like, and it was incredible for them, because they said, we feel like we've taught you everything we can, and that there's more for you, and that Paul can teach you that. And I was leading the home group, I was teaching every now and again in this church, and they released me to Paul. So they were incredible in their release of me, because it cost them in that. And then then I spent 2 years 2 days a week just following Paul around. I wasn't mentored, I was discipled, because discipleship involves discipline, and there was quite a lot of discipline, to be honest, because I needed it. because I didn't look very much like Jesus, as I just said. And I, at that time he'd teach in a Bible school in Coventry, and I'd just sit in the car with him, and we'd have 2 hours, and he'd just he'd go down there, he'd be like, right, at the end of this, on the way back home, I want 5 questions from you, and we just talk about life, and he'd just impart life to me. I'd just follow him around like the disciples used to follow Jesus, and he imparted life. 2007, he set me in place as the pastor of the church. But he didn't go anywhere. I was really glad I needed him. I didn't know what I was doing. I needed him, and he still is very much a part of it. So he still gets honoured every month financially. He can turn up whenever he wants. He has every right to come in, go. Sometimes he's there, sometimes he's not. He has, like I said, but he kind of, the more we grew, the more he released us to just kind of get on with it. So the church looks a little bit different now in terms of how things are expressed, because they get expressed how we do them, but the heart and the vision is exactly the same. Yeah. So the vision is Ephesians 4:11-16, which it was when he birthed it in 96. That we've reduced it down to restore to restore. That's the heart of the church. We believe that we want to restore people to go on and restore others. And that's really what we do. And I think in those 2 years, and Faye spent some time as well, kind of being a son in that way to him. Really, we just caught his heart and what he is and lives and breathes. We live and breathe. So this is a book that he wrote, which you can have for free, by the way. He says he loves you all. He says you can have it free. Just email his PA, paul@christianlifechurch.co.uk. She'll send you one for nothing. But if you listen to me and then read this, you would hear the same heart, but expressed slightly differently. Not because I have to, or because he makes me, because I want to, because I've caught his heart, because it's a heart relationship. That's how it works.
Yeah.
Go on, Faye.
No, just been the same for me. And I think one thing that I've really felt is like, although I'm a woman, I'm a son to Paul, in the sense of I received the full blessing as the firstborn son would do as well, no matter what my gender is. So yes, I'm a daughter to him, but with the fullness of a son, a firstborn son, which is beautiful. And Paul blesses and honours me in so many ways. It's beautiful. So yeah, there's no kind of rivalry between us, or you get more time with him than I do, or anything. We have the same, and yes, we relate to him slightly differently because I share different things from a woman's point of view. But it's really special. Yeah.
Brilliant. So the church culture itself, then, this is ingrained in church culture, this idea of sons and daughters and fathers and mothers, that is part of, would you say that was part of the apostolic nature of church life as an apostolic church? Or is that still a journey you're on?
Yeah, I think it's always a journey you're on, because I think we're kind of at that place now where it's only been the last, because you can't be a father until you've been a son. Yeah. You just can't be a father until you've been a son. So we're probably only learning about mothering and fathering ourselves over this last couple of years, something like that. So there's a great journey to go on. We were just talking to Paul about the other day and some of the challenges of that and what that means. And he was saying, well, you'll always keep learning about that, just as you'll keep learning about fathering your own kids. We father Joshua now, who's in his first year at uni, very differently than we do our 10-year-old daughter, very differently to what we used to do when she was a 2-year-old girl. So there's a constant learning in that sense. Yeah. But I think to be an apostle and not be a father, I don't think the two are compatible, because I don't say that every father is an apostle, but every true apostle to me must be a father, because to me apostles build things. Yeah. And the key thing they build is people. And I think one of the key things where we've gone a bit wrong is that we think apostles are people who build congregations. So if you can have a church of 1,000 people, well, you must be an apostle. Well, not necessarily. You might just be really good at marketing and know how to attract people who live in a consumerist culture. That's possible. I'm not saying it is, but it's possible. But actually, apostles build people. So, to me, the mark of an apostle and therefore an apostolic church is that people are built internally.
Yeah.
That actually there is pain in their lives that has been dealt with properly, that they are growing properly, that the things that you read about Paul telling you in the New Testament to put off, guilt, all the things he tells you to put off, and all the pain that gets caused from living life is actually being transformed. And then you're allowing it to restore others. So Paul's done that in us. Faye lost a mum when she was 14. I lost my first wife when I was 30 and then married Faye. And then you go through all sorts of pain. But one of the things that Paul did was he built us and took us through that into a place where you are actually not just pretending it's not there, but you are actually healed.
Yeah.
And for me, the mark of anything that is apostolic is firstly that it builds people, and secondly, those built people are taught how to build other people. Yeah. So I am not an apostle, but I am apostolic. Because when I look at things, I see them apostolically, which is to say, I look at the thing behind the thing. So most people can kind of, walk into a situation and think, and to me, to be apostolic and be an apostle is to see what the root of the issue is and to know how to deal with that root. And that's where a lot of people, I think, that's what you miss out on, because pastors they're not that gifted. They have the ability to care, to love. The prophet can perhaps see it, but the apostle knows how to deal with it. Yeah. And that's the difference. And I think that's what you miss out on if you don't get that. You end up with it not being built properly. And of course, if you as a person are not built properly, and then you're trying to lead other people who are not built properly, well, you're already walking with a limp before you're even trying to help other people. And what I find is a lot of people haven't, and I don't blame them, because they haven't had anybody to build them. They haven't had anybody who's walked with them over a long period of time, loved them as a father or a mother, and actually built them into somebody who is secure and solid enough to build other people and still been there for them through that whole time. And I think that's the key mark of what, to me, if it's apostolic, I'm not going to look at your website. I'm not going to look at how many likes you've got on your stage. I'm not going to look at how many people turn up on a Sunday morning. I want to know, tell me the testimonies of people who have been radically transformed by the love of God. Yeah. If all the congregation is still coming back and they've still got the same issue 10 years on, well, that shouldn't be happening if it's apostolic. It just shouldn't. And I can tell you it doesn't in our church. It just doesn't. I could line up many, many, many people who, I could fill your next 25, 30 weeks with a different person every week who would tell you for half an hour of how the apostolic nature of the church has transformed their life. And I'm talking divorce, abuse, rape, bankruptcy, every sort of thing you can imagine, and all the little ones in between. We have seen people restored and redeemed, and now they're walking into situations where they're doing that themselves. Yeah. And I think that's the power of the apostolic. It reproduces. So now we have sons and daughters to us who are going into places, and I don't need to go because they're going. Yeah. And at times they get stuck and they come back and we go, okay, well, tell us about this. Okay, well, you need to think about A, B, C. And they go, okay, and they go away and they do it. And guess what? It works because they've seen it modeled, because we do that exact same thing. Yeah. So we deal with it and we go to Paul and go, all right, oh, we missed that. Oh, of course, yeah. Oh, yeah, of course. And when he gets stuck, he goes to Derek. So there's this flow that happens. Yeah. That's how you get this exponential growth of life. Yeah. So what, we're just starting to see that now, I think.
Well, let me ask you another question on this, and we'll move on to something else maybe. But so why can't we just be in submission to Jesus, the first and great apostle? Why do we need to be under a leadership, whether that be man or woman? Why do we need to be under? But when I say man's leadership, I mean man or woman's leadership. But why do we need that when we have Jesus, the first and great apostle?
Well, I mean, 3 reasons. First of all, Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God. The word God is Elohim. It's plural. Kings, rulers, leaders, gods. So in the beginning, there was more than one. In the beginning, there was community. In the beginning, there was relationship. Secondly, Genesis 2:18. In perfection, in the Garden of Eden, God goes, it's not good for man to be alone. Okay. Well, hang on a minute. You're not alone. You've got Jesus. You've got the Father. He's walking in the cool of the day with the Father, and God goes, it's not good to be alone. So this idea that we can be on our own with Jesus, to me, in the first 2 chapters of the Bible, just don't stack up. But more than that, I take it to Hebrews 1 and verse 9. If I had more time, I'd go through verse 1, 2, and 3 as well. But verse 9, it says Jesus hates wickedness. Now, that word wickedness is the word anomia, which has its root in this idea of independence. Because, of course, wickedness is being independent of God. That's what it would mean to be wicked. It would do the things that God would not do. Well, Jesus hates independence. Well, guess what? Why do you think we don't have oneness? Why do you think that you have to have a thing called as one? Because of independence. Why do you think there's so much fighting and arguing? Why do you think churches split? Why do you think it's so hard in America? Well, because they celebrate independence. What a place to try and bring the gospel of the kingdom, in a place that celebrates independence. My Lord, who'd want to try and start a church over there? They celebrate the one thing that's going to bring the kingdom down.
Yeah.
So for me, I'm like, sorry, but and then you could take the 30 different one another's that are in the New Testament, love one another, serve one another, wash one another, pray for one another, submit to one another, be devoted to one another. Wow, be devoted to one another. Think about that one. Pray for one another, sing with one another. I mean, I'm sorry, but I can't read my Bible and think that I can just be a little lone soldier, me and Jesus, and I'll be all right. I just, to me, it's just nonsense. Sorry, but sorry.
Yeah, and I'm with you on that. I suppose what I was trying to think of was, will we have each other? And a lot of people think within terms of apostleship and apostles. The Bible says there are first apostles, then prophets. There's an order. There's not a greatness in terms of the apostles greater than any of the gifts God have given us, but there's an order within the church. And I suppose my question to you was really around that submission to that gift rather than submission to each other. I think we would all agree that we need each other. I suppose the question is, do we need apostles? Of course,
well, I suppose answer this question. I suppose maybe I'd answer that by asking this question. Where there are not apostles, are we one yet? Is the model we are using working? Because Jesus said, as you know more than me in John 17, when you won, the world will know me. Yeah. So oneness is very, very key. And I would argue, has the model we've used worked? It doesn't seem to have worked very well so far. And is there a biblical model that's a different model to the one? Well, maybe we should think about trying it then, because maybe God already gave gifts into the earth that could bring about that oneness. And of course, the antidote to independence is submission. And of course, submission's a word we don't like. But we forget that, so lots of people trot out, Ephesians 5, wives submit to husbands, and forget to carry on reading where it says, and husbands, love your wife as Christ loved the church. So I go, well, I would never ask that Faye submit to me or tell her she should submit to me. I would never do that anyway, but I would never expect it unless I loved her as Christ loved the church. Well, what did he do? He laid down his life for the church. So her submission as a wife to me can be and should only ever be in response to me laying down my life. And therefore, I think at the beginning I said, apostles are those who lay down their life. So my response, when submission's in the context of somebody laying down their life, I don't think it's really an issue. I think if you were to ask most married women whether they would have an issue submitting to somebody who loved them like Jesus loved them, I don't think many would have much of a problem with it. And so this idea we have that, an apostle is first and he's going to kind of come in and throw his weight around. Well, there's nothing apostolic about that at all, because that's not what Jesus did. If Jesus is the model apostle, then apostles should surely look like Jesus more than anybody else. And we're submitting to that, and that love and that care and that compassion and that desire. So yes, we submit to Paul, but that's a conscious choice we make every day. And why would I not submit to somebody who has my best at heart and knows more than me? Because that's the other issue right there, called humility.
So why do you think then people are fearful of apostolic leadership? Because particularly in this country, you know, I'm doing this series on the restoration of the apostolic gift of the church. I think we've got people on this Zoom already from different countries who, you know, the gift of the apostle is much more widely received. But in the UK, there's this fear or nervousness, particularly around anybody who would call themselves an apostle, but also about receiving the gift of the apostle. Like, you know, you receive a prophet, you receive the prophet's reward. But there's this nervousness. So why do you think, obviously it's not been your experience, but, you know, have you had people join your church that have had or been fearful of apostolic leadership? You know, heard bad reports about it, or, you know, it's controlling or domineering, or and have needed some kind of explanation before committing to joining an apostolic culture.
Yeah, and I think there's a history of that in our city. Not necessarily because it was, I don't know too much about it, but certainly kind of maybe in the 80s in Bradford there was quite a strong group of apostles, and they were men who were clearly apostolic, but they had no reference point. They had nobody to show them what it was, because they were bringing forth this new thing. So guess what? When you do something new, you make some mistakes. And of course, when you make mistakes and you're looking after people, you end up hurting people. And that is one of the tragedies of this thing. And I think a lot of people have been hurt, and rightly hurt people don't want to go somewhere where they've been hurt before, because they don't want to get hurt again. And you understand that entirely. And I think as well that a lot of, I am yet to meet anybody in the UK who understands what I understand or has experienced what I've experienced. I'm sure they're out there, and if anybody's on this Zoom call that kind of knows what I'm talking about, has lived our lives, please get in touch. I'd love to find somebody. But I think it's quite rare. I think what Paul carries is quite rare. And you know, he's had some massive battles in our own city as well in the early days, because I think, I think unless you understand submission, and unless you in the context of love, and unless you hear stories of people who have lived in that place for a long time, like we have, then it's very difficult, because you can put it down to, I don't know, how do you describe a relationship? How do I describe my relationship with Faye? How do I do that so you can fully grasp it? Well, I don't really. I can use metaphor, I can use imagery, I can use language, but it's very difficult to try and explain a relationship, other than to say, all I can say really is the fruit of it for us has been incredible blessing, and the fruit for the church has been incredible. You know, because we are built properly, and because the church is built properly, we just don't have a lot of the issues you hear about in churches. They just don't exist. So I hear some of my fellow pastor friends talk, and my heart goes out to them, but like, it's kind of alien to me, because it just doesn't happen, because it's been built properly. But of course that costs. There is a great cost. So you talk about an apostle's reward, and of course there is that in our transformed life, but there is a great cost to that as well. Because, you know, having somebody who always sees the root of the problem around is not easy. Having somebody who continually wants to make you more like Jesus and can see the ways you are not like Jesus, whether you want to tell them that or not, is not easy. You know, there are many. I remember once, kind of 3 or 4 years in, at the end of the year, Paul wrote me a letter. It was 4 A4 pages of typed. 3.5 pages were all the things I needed to work on. And the last paragraph was, "You're doing well, son, keep it up." And it was one of those moments where, like, I could have walked. I was like, I'm busting a gut here, man. I'm doing my very best. I'm busting a gut. And you're going to write me 3.5 pages of all the things I need to learn. And I think it takes a certain desire to walk in what that's got, and a certain security, actually. Yeah, well, go on.
Yeah, I think just the security in the relationship, you know, to receive such a letter, or to be in those times of sharing and it does require a lot of vulnerability, a lot of security of, okay, I am literally laying my heart out, going and not taking offense, not taking, oh well stuff you know, I'm doing all right, you know, and I think it is incredibly vulnerable, and but it's incredibly rewarding as well. But I think when you're sharing such depths of your heart, when you receive such a letter like that with all these different things that we need to work on, or that you're not quite there in this area or whatever, to be able to then go, okay, I know his heart. We have to remind ourselves quite often, just go, no.
Less so these days.
Yeah, less so these days. We know Paul's heart. We know what we signed up for, and we are choosing this. And yes, in our flesh, we might be curling our toes, going, "Oh, that really hit my my insecurities or my needs or whatever." But actually, no, we've seen the fruit, and we want the fruit, and we want to replicate that as well, and reproduce it as well. And you can only do that once you literally sow yourself, and you bury yourself, and you give yourself. And it's beautiful, but it is a vulnerable place, and
Wow.
yeah.
I think
That's amazing. Go on, Adam.
About that is, so let's take that lad. The key thing for us about having an apostle like that is that he didn't just write all these things down. He knew how I would react, and he wanted me, and then he wanted to talk to me, not about all these things, because eventually I talked to him, I didn't like that, and he went, yeah, well, I don't really want to talk about them. Let's talk about why you react like that. Let's talk about your need for affirmation. Let's talk about where that comes from.
Yeah.
And let's talk about how you can find that in God, because you need to know that you're a son to the Father, because otherwise you'll just get hit every time he does it. And that, I think, is where an apostle sees the thing behind the thing.
Yeah.
So it wasn't just that. Then it was like, okay, there's an issue in you are seeking affirmation here, and you want it, but I want you to know in the Father. And so I worked super hard for a number of years, probably a decade. But now, and this is what I think an apostle does better than anybody else, he sees that stuff behind the thing. And now I wake up and I know that God says, this is my son in whom I am well pleased. Talking about me.
Wow.
Because over a decade, Paul was like, no, you have to know you're a son of a Father. Because it's about your identity, it's about your security, your significance, your self-esteem. He's always building identity in us.
Yes.
And I think that's the key.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. We're going to give an opportunity for people to ask questions, brief questions, because we're just gone over time, and I don't want to spend too much time over time. But I do want to reiterate really that the sense of the fivefold ministry gifts, the ascension gifts as I call them, they were given by Jesus, and all of those gifts were given by Jesus. You know, he didn't give the other ones and then suddenly go, well, don't worry about the apostles because you don't really get it anyway. And what's happened is, I think, particularly in my era in church life, is that a lot of people who've come into the church who have apostolic gift have ended up A, being frustrated, or B, going away and expressing that gift through business and ministry outside the church, because they're born apostles. Now, I'm not saying that all apostles live in church, because I don't believe that. I believe there are apostles to business and so on. We'll touch on that on later weeks. So I'm not driving myself down at that end here. I believe that there are people who carry an apostolic gift to business, because for me, the heart of an apostle brings the kingdom. They represent the king as an ambassador of a particular kingdom. So that kingdom can come through business as much as it can come through church. So it's representation. But I suppose for the other fourfold ministries, and particularly the gift of prophecy, which has been more readily received in recent years, by that I mean the last 30 or 40 years here in the UK, it's clear to see that, an evangelist, well, I know what you do. You know, a teacher, well, I listen to you every week. I understand. A pastor, well, yeah, you're going to come and knock on my door and I'm not feeling so good, or you're going to try and gather me and protect me and look after me, and it's all about me because you're a pastor and that's what you should be doing. You know, prophet, well, yeah, prophesy over my life. Apostle, what does an actual apostle do? You know, what does that gift mean to the church? What does it do? What benefit does that have? I can understand the other four, but I don't understand the benefit of an apostle or what their job description is in many senses. And we've often said, oh, it's a sent out one. And it in many cases it is. I'm talking about the office or the role rather than everybody who is an apostle. Is a sent out one, yeah. But there's a much deeper thing than this going on. And I'm hoping in weeks to come, we'll begin to look at, actually, I believe an apostle carries an authority that the other gifts don't carry.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you know, but there is a difference in the authority that an apostle would carry than some of the other gifts that God has given. They're all needed. And the key for me of seeing the church to its full potential, as it says in that passage, full maturity in Christ, is that those fivefold ministry work together as one. That in a sense, there's not a hierarchy, but there is an understanding of function and different function within those gifts. And it feels to me that your church is further on than most churches I've visited, including my own, to understanding the role, and not just understanding, but receiving. And this is the key, isn't it? It's receiving the apostle.
Yeah.
It's not just understanding that from a biblical point of view that we did last week, but it's recognizing and going, yeah, I receive that. So in a one-liner each of you, my final question to you is this: what does an apostle do? What does what's their gift do? What is it for church? Tell me.
Well, Paul in the New Testament calls himself a master builder.
Yeah.
So to me, an apostle is somebody who builds people, businesses, charities, churches, but primarily people, because all those things are built on people. So they build people from the inside out to be like Jesus, and they have an ability to see what needs to be built and how it needs to be built that goes beyond anything else. That also is deeply challenging. And it's why, you know, our church is not that big. Because, you know, if you were to listen to Paul preach, you'd either love it or hate it. I mean, he is like Marmite. And some people hate it. In fact, plenty of people hate it. But some of us love it. And I think that's the end of the day, you know. Yeah, because it demands a lot of you as a person.
Yeah. I think for me, I kind of, in terms of like thinking of like a job role or a job title, I very much see it as like an architect who knows all the ins and outs, knows how to build from the ground up, and all the different people that are needed. And we watch Grand Designs. I love like house building things, and you know, those that don't have like an on-site kind of architect or a builder manager, it just goes completely to pot because they think they can do it. But not everybody's an architect, not everybody's an apostle, but actually they're vital, they're really needed. And we wouldn't have the church that we have without Paul. We wouldn't have it. We wouldn't be the people that we are without him. And that's Jesus through him, and him being a son, and him learning and growing and going through all of that, vulnerable, open up. And yeah, so that's how I see it. And yeah, relational.
Thank you. We've got one hand up, which is Flora. If you want to ask a quick question, as I say, we're going to bring it to a close. There is a little button somewhere on your device that you can raise a hand, and that means I can see you, because I can't see all the screen, so I'm hoping that they will come on. But at the moment, Flora has a question, I believe, for you.
Hi, I'm Ant. I'm with Flora. Adam and Faye, thank you for what you've said. The way you've described apostles, I've been a Christian quite a while. I've never seen one or recognized one the way you've described, except possibly, and this is a compliment to Alan, in Alan. I've had a little bit of time with Alan about a month ago, and also been to his AS1 meetings, and I've seen something very different in him, which I've not seen in the church ever before. So my question is this: do you need an apostolic relationship to fully develop and complete your destiny?
Well, the grace of God is a wonderful thing. And I'm sure God wants everybody to get into their destiny, but I think it becomes quicker and easier if you have an architect on board. So if you think of your life as a house, as Faye said, you know, in terms of grand designs, those who have a project manager on site to put the architect's plans into place generally come in on budget and on time. And those that don't have a project manager who knows what he's doing and can interpret the plans of the designer, kind of tend to do a lot worse, is our experience. But I mean,
it takes longer.
Yeah.
And for us, it's like, we want to run. I was an athlete growing up. I want to run as fast as I possibly can, but not just whiz through things willy-nilly and not fully understand what I did or what we did or what was said in that. Actually embrace every moment, but running. I'm like, yeah, I'm running the race. I'm going for it. I am all in, like my whole heart, my insecurities, my fears, my weaknesses, our marriage, our church, our friends, family, businesses, whatever. We are all in. And for us to be effective, fully effective, Paul's apostolic gift to us means we can be like Adam was saying at the beginning. He renders us glorious. So in every sphere of our lives, we can be Christ, we can be Jesus, we can bring the kingdom in our business, in our home, in our church. When I go to Tesco or Sainsbury's, I can bring the kingdom there. And I think having the architect there, having the apostolic gift there and insight means we can do that quicker, better and more efficient. And we can train others to do that as well, because there's people that can go to their spheres that I haven't got the time or the ability or the position to do that. So I think, it's a reproduction, which actually then brings the kingdom in a greater, bigger way than just one man can do.
Okay, did you pray to meet an apostle, or was it the grace of God that actually crossed his path with yours and you bonded with him?
So he found me, and you were in the church as through Bradford Christian School. You were in the school, weren't you?
Yeah, so. And then we probably been about 13 being in the church. And I think, you know, you can be in an apostolic church and not receive the apostolic gift. So there is a choice on my part. So I've grown up in it since being 13, but I've chosen to submit. I've chosen to run. I've chosen to listen. I've chosen to receive. You were sought out through being a son. And yes, there are people that have come to our church family because of the connection that they might well have had. And
there's plenty left as well.
Yeah, plenty left.
Thank you for that, and thank you for your question. We're going to have one more question, and then we're going to finish. His hand's gone down. I hope he's still there. There was a question coming from Apostle John Amiobi. So one of the apostles, has he gone, or is he still with us? His hand was up and then went. Speak now, John. There he is now. Apostle John Amiobi has a question for you. Better get this one right.
I think this is the wrong way around.
Thank you. Sorry. All right. Thank you very much. I just want to say thank you very much for what you have said today. I think it's a wonderful thing to be able to sort of listen to the interview. Okay, looking at the work that apostles actually do. One of the things I hold very dearly in the Word of God, you've mentioned the aspect of building. Okay, because you are looking at building people to be able to. If you are not able to build people, okay, at times you've missed it. Okay, and so it's quite an. But another thing I actually want to mention, which I look at as a job description, is that apostles are there to actually guard the apostolic doctrine. Okay, there are quite a number of people today that, but I'm in a meeting at times, you discover when people are saying things that my spirit actually lifts in me. I say, no, this is not right. I run through the scriptures immediately. This is not right. This is not right. This is not. But the greatest thing I do, if I'm able to meet people, I will meet them. It's not to criticize them, okay, but just to sit down with them. By the grace of God, I have sons and daughters that the Lord has helped to be able to come alongside. We tell them, you know what, we are just coming alongside, just as you have said. We are not there as somebody greater or higher. We are just coming alongside. Okay, you look at the book of Jude, verse 3, it says, contend earnestly for the faith that was once delivered to the saints. Okay, I believe that is one of the greatest things that I hold very, very dearly. Okay, and I pray the Lord would bless us in Jesus. The aspect of submission, maybe when it's my turn, I'll be talking a little bit about
that. Thank you, John, Apostle John. For those who don't know, Apostle John will be one of our guests later on in the series. He is the most gracious of apostles. He carries such a grace on his life, and it is the clear marking of an apostle that they carry that grace and how they relate to people. And I've known John for a very long time now, and he has consistently carried grace throughout his life and distributed to other people around him, as well as many other attributes. But we get the privilege of hearing John in another interview week a bit later on, and I'm so looking forward to that, Apostle John, for the many years you've served here and for the wisdom that you carry. And but I wanted to hear tonight from somebody who has lived under apostolic leadership, because actually, unless we learn to live under apostolic leadership, we will never see the fruit of apostolic leadership. And we need to break the fear that has gripped the vast majority of church in this country around the apostolic gift. Because if the enemy can keep that gift away from the church, we will never fully develop. We'll be weakened at best, but we will never be as one and therefore fully reach the fullness of Christ that he promises us. So we're gonna leave it there, folks. I want to personally thank you guys for coming on and for sharing, for expressing your vulnerability as well in times. And you know, I've never met Paul, but I now want to meet him. and that's a good sign of a son and daughter, isn't it? That they talk in such a way about their spiritual dad that you want to meet their spiritual dad. So I want to bless Paul for what he's did and for how he stood up as an apostle and for what he's poured into your lives and into the lives, I'm sure, of many, many others. But the courage that it's took for him to stand as an apostle, probably without bandering the title, but doing it well. And we'll come on in future weeks to false apostles. And I think it's important that we look at the false, because you recognize the true apostle much greater when you understand what a false apostle is. And your conversation tonight has really helped us understand more fully what an apostle does and who they are and the gift they can be to so many of us. So like you, I have at least two spiritual dads. One I've had for 40 years and another one I've had for 15 years. And I relate as a son to those dads. And it's an absolute privilege to do that without an agenda.
Yeah.
My agenda is just quite simple. I'm a son to a dad. And you know, I'm not looking for anything other than to be a good son to a dad. And I think that in many senses sums up the apostolic gift. When you find it, submit to it and learn what it is to be a son. and a daughter, and you guys have done that exceptionally well. Listen, I want to thank you. Time has gone on, and I've tried to finish, but I could stay here talking to you guys all night if I'm being honest. It's such a thrill.
To bed at some stage. So,
and you know what? You are leading the way. I want to say that to you and to Paul. I've travelled this country extensively, and there are very few churches who understand this principle. Very few churches, even churches that call themselves apostolic churches. And the vast majority of churches, as I said last week, are run by pastors, not apostolic leaders. And of course, we need pastors. I'm not saying we don't, but we need apostolic leaders. And if there's ever a time this country needs true apostolic leaders to stand up, it's right now, isn't it? And speak with authority into this nation, with the authority that Jesus has transferred to them. So thank you so much for sharing with us tonight, for giving of your lives tonight. I'm just going to pray and bless you guys before we go. If you're online, raise your hand. If you're still watching on Facebook, then leave a comment for these guys. But I want to pray and bless you. Father, I just thank you for these amazing people, for their testimony of how they have learned to submit to one of God's people, an apostle of the faith, and how they've learned and been willing to be good sons and daughters to a spiritual dad. And I thank you for that model. I thank you. It's a model that Jesus brought, and I think it's a model that you guys are carrying. And I want to bless you guys for sharing your hearts tonight. And I just have a real sense that the significance of what you've shared tonight is much bigger in the spiritual realm than you're seeing right now. It's much bigger in the spiritual realm. And you've modeled something for the last 15 years or so that not a lot of people are modeling well in the UK, but you've modeled it well. And it's going to be a testimony of what God wants to do in establishing leadership that has governmental leadership in it. So thank you guys. Bless you guys. We bless your kids. We bless your business. We bless your church. We bless you too as individuals. And we pray the peace of God rest upon you this night and forevermore. In Jesus' name, amen. Let's just give them a little round of applause there, can we? Show our appreciation for you guys. So we're going to leave it there. We'll be back again next week, week 3, I think of 8. So back again next week, and I'll be doing a little bit more teaching on digging down a little bit more on what the apostolic gift is and some of the characteristics of that. And then the following week we'll have another guest. So hopefully come back next week. See you again. If you've got any comments or questions, you can email them in, and we'll try and continue the conversation together so we grow together in the understanding of what it means to receive the apostolic gift in today's church. So bless everyone. Nice to see you. See you again next week. Thanks, everyone.